Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chocobo Dash. I am your host, Elliot Lefebvre, and with me, as always, is my co-host.
Now, Celestine.
Well, we've got a great show for you today. We've got a whole lot of topics lined up to talk about, but before we get into the meat of the show, first of all, Nell, what have you been up to this week?
Well, my group finally got to the Twisters phase in Twintania, and I've been working on Titan as usual. But aside from that, I actually surprised myself and finished my Hammer of the Luminary for Blacksmith over the weekend.
Really? Could you show that off for us?
I could. Just give me a moment here.
All right.
Where did I put that? Here we go. Hammer of the Luminary. For those of you who are interested, it is actually massive when it's on your back. It's about the size, I would say, of a shield. But when you pull it out, it becomes a regular-sized hammer.
Still, it is your first luminary. This is your first luminary tool as a crafter, isn't it?
It is my first luminary crafting tool, yes.
I remember you actually asked if I could kindly give you some of those ever-necessary fire shards to help complete that, so that's great.
Oh my goodness, that took so many fire shards.
I'm sorry I didn't have more to give you. But
I think I went just through the 41 to 50 range. I think I went through 25,000 shards.
Yep. Sounds about right. So, but still, that's great. That's took a lot of work, and congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. Aside from that, not too much really. I've been working on capping my soldiery and doing my dailies as usual. And a couple of days after this podcast goes live, I'll actually be finished all of the dailies up to this point.
Great. Yeah, I think we're both in the same boat for dailies. I might be one day behind you because of having to go off to a convention, but that's about it.
All right. Well, what about you? What have you been up to this week?
Well, I've been, obviously, working on dailies, getting my soldiery capped, doing all that sort of stuff. I've also been working on assembling some glamour sets for more of my classes. What I'm wearing right now is my Dragoon glamour set, since they, with 2.25, introduced the ability to dye the Darklight, and all of the Darklight gear, when dyed, looks absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I don't know if they can make the heavy dark light armor look any good with paint job, but hey, more power to them.
Hey, even I've seen people walking around in that. It looks a lot better now. Still, refrigerator on your back, but it looks a lot better than it did. Other than that, I've also been working on leveling the last couple of crafting professions that I don't have at 50 yet, so I was just almost at the cap with Leatherworker, and I'm going to be capping that out this week, and then probably moving on to Blacksmith myself.
Well, it's always fun to try to cap up a crafting job. If you do the leaves method, it's usually the easiest way.
Yep. Of course, as much as you can cap out things in terms of crafting, there are some things that are crafted in the real world that are a little harder to get your hands on. So, Nell, especially since this is a bit of a sticky point for you, why don't you introduce our first topic of the day?
Regional store exclusives and the history about how things have always been just Japanese. One of the wonderful things that we encountered over the last few days was the fact that there's a whole bunch of stuff exclusive to the Japanese Square Enix store. One thing in particular that I know I myself and my co-host Elliot here noticed right away is, do you remember back when they first were showing off 2.0, that shirt that Yoshida-san and the rest of his team were wearing?
Oh, I remember it very well. The Meteor Survivor shirt, which pretty much every fan was like, how can I get one of those?
Wasn't there like a 90-some page topic on the official forums of people saying, shut up and take my money?
I don't remember exactly how many pages it was, but I know that, pretty much everyone wanted it right away, especially since that shirt was not too long after people had just finished watching the big, end of 1.0 trailer and were kind of psyched up about what 2.0 was going to bring.
Not to mention a lot of us that were on the forums and noticing that were Meteor survivors. So we really wanted that shirt. Lo and behold, guess what's on the official Japanese Square Enix store? The Meteor Survivor shirt. And you know what else? They don't ship internationally.
Now, this is actually, and the reason we mentioned that it was kind of a history thing is because this is a problem that we've classically had if you've been playing Final Fantasy XIV or if you've been playing Final Fantasy XI for any length of time. Obviously, the game is available both in North America and in Japan, and there's always, the support has never been an issue, but the peripheral things like shirts, things like little plushies, all the little memorabilia that people would like to accumulate seems to, for some reason, get a release in Japan and then get no international options, no North American equivalent. I know that I have a little Mandragora plushie from Final Fantasy XI, and the only way that I got that was because a girlfriend of mine at the time was kind enough to pick one up at a convention that had specifically imported them, because you couldn't get them otherwise. They just weren't sold. And I know a lot of people would have bought them otherwise. I know there was a Carbuncle plushie available. Everyone who played 11 wanted a Carbuncle plushie, and it was made, but you couldn't get it if you were in North America, pretty much for no reason.
And I can understand the whole, hey, look, shipping internationally costs money, but when you're charging the customer to ship, that's not really an excuse anymore.
I think there's kind of a long-standing, I don't want to say misconception exactly, but obviously since Final Fantasy is a Japanese game, there seems to be a tendency among the developers to kind of forget the fact that the North American player base is here and often is just as invested in the game, in some cases even more than the Japanese player base. If I am not mistaken, the first down of turn 9 was done by an American free company. We are an invested group of players, and it's kind of sad that we're here, we're paying subscriptions, we're supporting the game, but we can't get all this cool stuff that we would really like to kind of show our support for the game as a whole.
Yeah, Blue Collar actually was the first to down Twintania and the first to down turn 9. So we do have a vested interest as a community over in North America and in Europe. And thankfully the soundtracks have been released internationally, and that's a good starting point. I know that the Moogle was released internationally. I think we got a digital version of the original soundtrack, like the battle songs and the open area songs soundtrack, but we didn't get a physical copy. And there's so much more stuff on the site right now that I know I would love to get, but I don't want to pay third-party shippers. Because for those of you who don't know, if you order from a third-party shipper in Japan, they'll usually charge you either a flat rate or a percentage based off of the cost of the materials. So if you're ordering, given the look of what some of that stuff was, you'd be probably easily drop $100-$150 easily just on the merch, and then you'd be paying for shipping, and then you'd also be paying this fee on top of it for them to pick it up. So that goes from being 150 plus shipping to possibly 250 plus shipping, just to have somebody walk into a Square Enix store and pick it up for you because they won't ship internationally. And that's a terrible thing when there's been huge outcries for this stuff. People want it. They don't even have to advertise it. Just put it up on the US or North American, European Square Enix stores. Just a picture and an order form, and people will buy it. I know I would buy it. I'm actually considering going through these third parties because I want... There's a Gaia's shirt. There is the Meteor Survivor shirt. There's a Hildebrand shirt. I mean, yeah, not everyone loves Hildebrand, but those who love Hildebrand, oh my god, you'd want this shirt.
And may I say that anyone who does not like Hildebrand is a villain and should be treated accordingly.
Now. Some people don't like that sense of humor, and I can understand that. But they're wrong.
That would be my point in its entirety. I can understand it. I can also understand why, some people don't tip at restaurants. That doesn't make it right.
But yeah, there's a bunch of really cool merchandise on there. If you want to go check it out, there's buttons, there's plush toys, there's shirts, there's glass leave plates, glass, see-through. You can put them up in your window and have the light shine through them. I mean, who wouldn't want something like that?
And it's odd because it's Square basically just leaving money on the table. The money would be going to them. Instead, they're basically saying, please import this. We don't want as much of your money, which seems just utterly fruitless. I don't understand why.
The thing that's a little bit weird to me on this issue is I believe Yoshida actually was in an interview a while ago, said that he wanted to make that kind of stuff open to everybody. But here we are now with this stuff being sectioned off for merchandise. Now, don't get me wrong, anything with an in-game item availability, the soundtracks having the minions, for example, has been made available internationally. But it's the stuff that doesn't have a direct item tie-in that some of us want. I mean, I don't need to have a minion to want the soundtrack. Yes, it's a nice added bonus for a minion-holic like myself, but I would proudly wear a Meteor Survivor shirt out at conventions or even like just hanging out with some friends.
The only thing I can think of, the only possible explanation I can think of, is some sort of safety regulations or some sort of legal standards that would in some way make it slightly more complicated to release this stuff in America versus releasing it in Japan, because I know, for instance, that Japanese toys often are not subject to the same sort of safety standards as American toys. But even then, I think we're getting to the point, especially with the international success of this game, where we need to move past the idea that, well, this is just for Japan. We need to, as the player base becomes more and more multinational, I think Square really needs to start embracing the idea that this is not, these extras are not just for the Japanese players. They're for everyone who plays and enjoys the game.
Because everybody's going to want them. But one thing that they don't want, why don't you flick up the next topic?
Well, some people do want this, though, because one of the next things we need to talk about are speed runs. And if you've been running anything at the high level in Final Fantasy XIV, by this point you will have come across at least one speed run party. Do a duty roulette, and I guarantee you will come across a speed run party. And as the name implies, it is a run based solely around speed. Grab huge groups of enemies, skip everything you possibly can, and focus all of your energies on blitzing right through all of the content just to get that sweet, sweet soldiery bonus at the end.
Or even just going for the first little bit just to get mythology over and over again.
And now, here's the thing that really gets me about speedruns. I don't particularly care for speedruns. I've actually gone in with a group and timed how fast everything went on a speedrun, and timed how fast things went with the same group without doing the speed run. Same classes, same everything. You're looking at a difference of about 4 minutes.
I can understand why speedrunners would be like, okay, well, 4 minutes adds up because it's 4 minutes, then 8 minutes, then 12 minutes. Yeah, I can understand that. But how often are you going to be doing more than 4 or 5 dungeons in a row? And if you're speedrunning for the sake of speedrunning, you're going to be making your own party for that anyway, so you don't need to worry about using Duty Finder for this.
And the result is that you have this push, and this is one of the things that I've noted about tanking in 2.2, where, everything is top speed, there's no chance to relax, there's no chance to talk, and for many of the people who are desperately seeking speedruns, any failure, no matter how slight, is seen as just unimaginably rude. Like, how dare you not pull everything you can at top speed? How dare you not race through this? As if, somehow the only possible way to experience this is at it as a speed run. I understand that some people find, for instance, dungeons boring, but if you find them boring, why are you going into them?
Well, I can understand they're going in for their soldiery or mythology, especially mythology if they're doing it for the animus weapon. But if you're using the roulette, there should be the expectation that you're not going to speedrun. If you're going to speedrun, you should be using Party Finder, because let's face it, if you go in for the mythology, and this is pretty much a standard practice from my understanding, is to run Brave Flocks for your mythology. So you run the first 2 bosses, then you drop and you repeat. What's that going to do to the people that start that run for their daily roulette, and then you just immediately drop out? That means they're stuck there waiting for a replacement that's actually clicked join in from a continuation. And then that person who joins in misses out on all of their mythology and just only gets the soldiery.
And they also miss out on some of the loot, which is also, while not vital for endgame progression, it's nice to have. It's cosmetic. It's, a reward. And the result is that you have a lot of people who are basically being very, I don't want to say unprofessional, this isn't a job, but very rude and very unpleasant to deal with when basically looking at other players as just, you are the engine by which I get the stones that I want.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to speedrun in the Duty Finder, when you pop in, ask your party. It's all a matter of courtesy. Your party might be like, sure, let's run with the speedrun. And then, hey, look, you got your speedrun. If you have a new person, don't rage and quit. They gotta learn somehow. Not everybody is going to be super hardcore elite. Not everyone's going to be a noob. But you're going to find a nice middle ground, and if you can work with your party, then you'll be able to see all the places you'll go.
And more to the point, if you're really only interested in a speedrun, okay, then find a bunch of other people who are only interested in a speedrun. If you're joining a roulette, joining a random group of people, and I would say you kind of have a responsibility to be pleasant to those people, because you don't know them, you don't know what they're looking for, and perhaps most importantly, if you're a DPS, be DPS. If you're healing, be the healer. If you're the tank, be the tank. But don't try to tell everyone else in the group what to do, because I've seen that happen far too often, and it's toxic, it's unpleasant, and it makes a lot of the people who you are relying on in the Duty Finder just not want to use the Duty Finder anymore.
Yeah, especially with our next topic, and perhaps to go with a nice segue on what you just discussed about should DPS and healers be basically DPS and healers and not both.
Now, this is one of those things that I think you can really go back and forth on. On the one hand, the 2 healers in the game, both Scholar and White Mage, do have access to Cleric stands, which you can pop into and out of very quickly, and they have access to a fair amount of DPS. On the other hand, for a lot of the people who are playing healers, the reason you're playing a healer is because you want to primarily heal. That's why you picked a healer as opposed to the other classes, which can DPS or tank. You want to be healing, so you're not there, first of all, to be DPS. So, Nell, what is your opinion on this? Do you feel like if you are in a run, the healer should be adding in DPS?
I feel personally that the healer should focus primarily on healing, and if they can, then feel free to throw out your additional damage. It helps the party go a little bit faster, but your number one priority is keeping the party alive. If your party is sitting at 25% of their maximum health because you want to get off an extra nuke, you're doing something wrong.
I would say, I think it comes down to, in large part, much like any other ability in the game, it's situational awareness. I have run with healers who are comfortable having people, get down to about half health, while, for instance, they are, as a White Mage, running forward and holying things. Which, because Holy has a stun element, said, okay, you're reducing the amount of incoming damage. You're balancing a little more closely, but hey, you're still keeping an eye on health. I know other healers who are much more comfortable hanging back and making sure people are mostly topped off before tossing out a few DPS spells. The real question is, what are you comfortable with as a healer? What is the state of the group? And what's going on around you? I don't think that any healer should be expected to DPS, but I also think that it is knowing when you can DPS and knowing how you can use that to help your group is an important part of being a good healer.
I agree. If you want to DPS as a healer, just make sure your party is your first and foremost priority. If you want to DPS, your party needs to make sure, you have to make sure that they're at decent health and they're going to stay at decent health while you do those damage spells. Because otherwise, you're basically putting the party and technically the run at risk if a member dies, and then you have to expend a lot more MP getting them back up, getting them healed, getting them back in the fight. And that's going to do less for your DPS than it would if you had just healed straight up.
Remember, the bard isn't going to be doing any damage if he's face down on the floor.
Indeed. Speaking of flooring, shall we jump into the next topic?
Why don't we? That was a bit less graceful as a segue, but I think it works out.
If it works, right?
There you go.
All right. The next subject is one that recently came up. There was a mention of roughly how much personal housing is going to cost. Now, if anyone remembers what happened when we got told the price for free company housing, you'll take this with a large dose of salt. But we were told that it would be approximately 850,000 gil for a personal home.
I am going to buy, this is where it winds up at, I am going to buy so many personal houses. I will have more houses than I know what to do with. I will ask people over for dinner, and I will say, before you come to dinner, please go to my pre-dinner house, then come to my dinner house, then afterwards we can all go to my post-dinner house, and after that, I will go back to my main house for the week.
I don't plan on buying that many houses, and to be completely fair, I think you're going to be limited to one. But yeah, the joke is there that if this is actually how much the housing is going to cost, that's a good spot. It's something to strive for, but at the same token, you do realize that on most servers now, the small plot of land is only about 2 million.
And that's actually, I've heard some people saying that another translation has pegged that number not as 850,000, but as it will be somewhere between 850,000 and the cost for a small plot of land, which still winds up being less insane than the free company housing prices were, but is slightly higher than 850,000.
We'll have to see how that goes. The housing cost has always been kind of a touchy subject since housing was first introduced.
I will say that as someone who writes about MMOs in a large sense, as well as writing about Final Fantasy XIV, it is really important that personal housing be implemented correctly and that the pricing be handled correctly, because we're in the middle of a period of time in which a lot of games are going to be offering, if not housing exactly, then at least something, I don't want to say on par with it, but in that general vein. You've got WildStar coming out in about a month, and it's going to have personal housing. World of Warcraft's next expansion is going to have housing. You have several games like Arcade, which are in testing now and advertise personal housing. And Square really kind of, I don't want to say drop. I don't think dropped the ball is appropriate enough here. It's more like they dropped the ball and then the ball caught on fire and it accidentally leapt into the stands and killed 7 people. That's how bad the initial set of prices were.
Are you sure there wasn't a riot afterwards about the flaming ball causing more death?
There may very well have been. But I think it's so very important at this point that when personal housing comes out, people feel like, I can get a house, I can actually do this, and not that sense of grim, teeth-gritting inevitability that we got with free company housing. So I think 850 is a reasonable place to start off with. I think maybe, tweaking it a little bit up and down is fine. I think, though, for instance, if we see the legacy servers are going to be priced higher again, then
No, that's bull. And
that's not going to go well.
No, the fact that if they did that with the legacy servers again, there would be a massive uproar because of the fact that you can take prices of stuff on the server and compare it to prices on other servers, and they sell for roughly the same, legacy or not. And if they're going by the amount of guild that is in individual possession, that's not right either, because you've got a bunch of inactive accounts or banned accounts like RMT that would have had massive stockpiles of guild, and that's not fair to count that against the regular player base.
Not to mention that at this point that defense doesn't hold water anyway, because at this point you can transfer from a legacy server over to a non-legacy server. So if it's, you can always say, the price of housing is way too high here, I'm just going to pick up shop and leave.
Yeah, so here's hoping that the personal housing is a generic standard across the system.
And let's hope that they stay around at that $850. That seems like a good price. If that's, or, between $850 and $2 million, again, reasonable price. I will be able to afford slightly fewer houses if that's the case, but that's all right.
I certainly hope you'll pay to help furnish the studio if you have that much money.
You pay. This is your free company house. I didn't invest. If I get invested, I get votes about how the rooms are laid out.
Well, at least bring in a potted plant.
You heard it here first, people. Stay tuned, and next week we will have a potted plant in the center of the room.
All right, though. I do believe we have one last subject to go over before we close out the show, though.
That does sound like a good thing, and I think it's another interesting topic in the same vein as housing, and sort of not necessary gameplay systems, but still nice to have. We heard a little bit more about the marriage system. It was originally promised to be a little bit better than it is, but it is coming.
And it's supposed to be in the church out in Eastern Shroud, so that would be the Path of the 12, I believe, on the map.
The Sanctum of the 12, yeah.
So that would be interesting to see how that goes. There has been talk about how you can have wedding rings, and that if somebody drops one, it's considered a divorce. Other than that, we don't really know too much more.
Except the other thing we do know is that the wedding dress should be very lovely and should have some transparent portions to it, which sounds nice. I'd like to see. It was discussed in that sense more as a technical achievement than as a, look at all of the skin this is showing off sense.
I think it's more along the lines, if they're doing with that, it'll probably be the veil.
Most likely. That would be pretty nice, though. But what are your thoughts / hopes for the wedding system?
Well, it's a very touchy subject. I'd rather not get into the specifics on it, but there has been some lengthy debate on the forums regarding that, and I'd like to basically say that I'm not stepping on either side of that debate. I have my own opinions, and as much as I do want to share them, I want to keep a little bit of a neutral on this one. But I would have to say that I am looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing more information about it. Specifically, I'd like to see what the outfits look like. I'd like to see a little bit more about the details, see if you can customize it, that kind of stuff.
I will second that. I would also say that I think, for one thing, I'd like to hope that the system will be as inclusive as possible for everyone.
Agreed.
And the other thing I would really hope for is that it will allow you to actually change your character's name accordingly, depending on your character's surname and the surname of the person that your character is getting married to. Because that just seems like it would be a nice little touch and a way to sort of, I don't want to say bring families together, but you get the idea. Really kind of create that sense of, yeah, we're linked. We're in the same family.
That'd be kind of interesting, especially for without the fact that we don't have naming way cards yet, but that's a subject for another day.
Yes, it is, because I think we have just about run up through our usual time period. Am I correct on that now?
That sounds about right.
So, as always, you can check out our Twitters and sites. You can take a look at this episode on the official forum thread. You can respond to the official forum thread with any topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, suggestions, complaints. You can also chime in on the YouTube video if you have anything else you'd like to say or something you'd like to see us cover in the future.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you did enjoy it. Every time you like the video, it does push it up in the search results so more people can see it and we can get bigger and have more people provide feedback so we can give an even better show.
Great. I think that's just about for this week's episode of Chocobo Dash, unless you have anything else you'd like to add before the end.
No, that's it. Our Twitters are in the description, and if you have any other questions, you can feel free to contact either of us.
Yeah. So, until this time next week, I'm Elliot Lefebvre.
And I'm Nell Celestine.
Bidding you adieu.